2 years old when we left in March of 1979, a few months after the Shah had left and just after Khomeini had arrived.
What is the Shah and what is Khomeini?
Yeah, sorry. The Shah, the former monarch of Iran, the Pahlavi dynasty, which came into power in the 1930s, deposing a previous dynasty that had been around for a couple hundred years. And his father brought in that dynasty, and then it was eventually, he was deposed by the British and the Americans, who felt he was getting too close to the Nazis during World War II, concerned about supply routes for the Nazis, oil. And his son was installed on the throne at a very young age, I believe 18 or 19. And he ruled Iran from that period, 1941, 1942, around that time, all the way through 79. A great ally of the United States over time, eventually, and was overthrown in a revolution, and by Khomeini, who was a senior cleric who had been a thorn in the Shah's side since the 60s, was exiled first to Turkey, then Iraq, then ultimately to France, right outside Paris, actually. From there, he basically led the revolution that led to the Shah's removal, ouster in 79.
And how was Iran different when the Shah was in power versus when Khomeini was in power?
That depends on who you ask. It was a constitutional monarchy. The Shah had powers that exceeded beyond what we think a constitutional monarchy has today, like in Great Britain. He ruled with an iron fist when he needed to. He was an authoritarian, but he also was one that was rapidly modernizing Iranian society, wanted to make it more like the West, using Iran's immense oil resources and wealth to really accelerate development, building of social institutions, healthcare, literacy, modernization, all of those things. That was his focus. Still to religion, but his policies were inconsistent with where the traditional religious Iranians wanted to go. And it sort of created a schism in society. And you also had a wealth gap, an income disparity. Immense wealth poured into the country, but it didn't trickle its way downward into the sort of the village and rural poor. And so there was a lot of frustration, a lot of disenchantment with his policies. And that led to sort of this populist backlash of wanting something that was more democratic, more accountable, more like the West, ironically. And that sort of was the beginning of where that cycle led.
And so how did Khomeini take power of Iran?
He led a movement, a mass populist movement, not a religious one, but meant to go across multiple socioeconomic and political divides, and unified the opposition under this idea of removing the monarchy, removing dependence on the West. He specifically said the United States was to large part to blame for Iran being in the state that it was, for people not having to live, the freedoms, the liberties. He blamed the Shah's use of the secret police and torture methods on the United States and on Israel, who he claimed, taught the secret police how to do these things. There's a complicated sort of history to that. And he basically promised them salvation from what he portrayed as a puppet tyrant of the United States. And the masses bought into this, but both the left and the right. The right consisted of the black, the Islamists. So you had the red, which were sort of the Marxist socialist followers. You had the black, and then you had sort of that middle in between, and they all coalesced around this one charismatic religious figure, a very austere man, one who didn't really have a lot of luxuries himself, led a simple life, but was consistent with his opposition to what he saw tyranny and despotism. And people bought into it.
And the Americans didn't like this.
The Americans didn't know what to make of it, and there was a failure, and I think Andrew can talk about this as well, over a failure by the State Department and the CIA in the 70s to see where the threat was. They saw the threat coming from the Soviet Union. They were still afraid of Soviet encroachment in the Middle East, particularly through Iran. Their concerns were with the Marxists, the communist parties. They did not carefully look at the black. They didn't look at the Islamists. They didn't see them as a threat until it was too late. The Shah himself blocked or really didn't give the CIA full access to Iran. There was limited information that was coming out. He relied on his own intelligence, which fed him information he wanted to hear, which is that everything is going great. The country's doing well. The people love you. They're all happy, until the discontent and the protest they reached a threshold and it was too late to do anything about it.
Yeah, the United States was kind of at their peak period